Thanks.
All right, awesome. Hey, everyone. Thanks for hanging out with me today on this snowy Thursday evening. Depending on where you're watching from, of course. It's absolutely great to be here at this year's Midwinter Nights Con with this awesome team at Absolute AppSec. I'm a huge fan of your podcast, seriously. And if you're watching this and you haven't checked out Absolute AppSec's podcast, please do yourself a favor, give yourself an early Christmas present and check it out because it's amazing. I think they just passed their 100th episode. I think it's like up to 116. I just checked, and they've got all my favorites on there, and I fangirl every time when I listen. So what I love about the podcast is that it covers pretty much every aspect of security, not just the application security domain, which although application security is my favorite domain, but it covers like news from the industry, exploits, and all these kind of great things. So I love it, and check it out. And if you've been checking out the conference like I have in the background, you'll realize that we've talked a lot about technical exploits and some of the more like hands-on dirty stuff of application security and cybersecurity in general. So for this talk, I actually want to switch gears for a little bit and talk about the human side of information security, because we're all humans, at least I hope we are, and we have a human side. So it's about to get a little touchy-feely over here, but don't worry, I'll keep it PG. But first, a little bit about me. My name is Naomi Buckwalter, and I'm the Director of Information Security and Privacy at Energage, where our mission is to make the world a better place to work together. I've been in tech for over 20 years and have worked on application development teams and DevOps teams, big and small, both as a developer and as a security advisor, which is what I currently do. And over the years, I have learned quite a few things about relationships between DevOps and security teams that I'd like to share with you tonight. I've titled this talk 6 Things DevOps Wants from InfoSec, in which I explain a few things that I think will help you as an information security professional make interacting with DevOps teams just a little smoother than what we sometimes see between security and DevOps. This is what I like to call kind of like a marriage counseling session between DevOps and InfoSec. Just kidding. Or maybe I'm not. All right, let's start with this. Picture this. You are a developer rock star on a team of similarly skilled, butt-kicking, zero-defect writing, coding ninjas. You guys are amazing, and you get things done, right? Your team has spent the last few months cranking out a new product, closing stories and epics left and right, hardly sleeping, but not caring at the least because your team is awesome. You're amazing. You're building next generation, bespoke, awe-inspiring, industry disruptive software. You're making the world a better place. You are days away from your release and you hand over your baby over to the security team for security testing. Here we go, little baby. And boom! You get hit with a security assessment report, 20, 30, 40 pages long. Your app, your baby, is riddled with security flaws. Your infrastructure is deemed a flaming hot mess. And your once beautiful, pure, and perfect DevOps love child has morphed into a screaming, fist-pounding, public tantruming toddler in desperate need of a nap. And your team is not very happy. You now find yourself stuck between a rock and a hard place. Do you release your product on schedule with known security defects and risk your company's security posture and reputation? Or do you patch, retest, and release a hardened product, but beyond your initial promise date, increasing project costs and risk losing dollars for the business? It's a really tough decision. It's not difficult at all to see why developers view security as a barrier to their objectives and project goals. It's us versus them, the good guys versus the bad guys or gals. The security is the bad guy or gal. Security is regularly seen as a stumbling block on the path to the promised land of production. Security is seen as a disabler for the business instead of an enabler. So it's no wonder why security can have a bad reputation, at least in the many parts that I've seen in the industry. And now this is what I meant when I said earlier that this talk's going to be a little bit like marriage counseling between DevOps and security, because sometimes DevOps and security just doesn't communicate. Like, we don't talk to each other. Sometimes one team does their own thing without the other team knowing about it. Like that commercial with the husband buying a brand new car for the wife, like as a surprise, like, come outside, honey, I'm gonna show you this. And he's like, and the wife looks at it, it's like, oh, you bought me a car. Well, I promise you guys, like, that is so unrealistic. That definitely does not happen, especially me as a wife. I'd be so mad if my husband went out and bought a car without telling me. I'd be like, did you understand that we have a budget? Do you understand? I already have a car. Like, I didn't even want a car. And yes, it's a very nice gesture, but like, we should have talked about this. You completely blew out our budget for the rest of the year. Like, that is not cool. Not cool. So that's kind of what we're seeing sometimes, and what I've seen between DevOps and security, developers and security teams. That lack of communication, that lack of understanding each other's needs and wants, and certainly expectations, right? And I'm sure if you guys are thinking back to your own marriages, you can probably come up with your own examples. Well, I'm here to say that this should not be this way. It shouldn't be an us versus them, the good guys or gals versus the bad guys or gals, but us together. That's why you see the handshake there. We are all on the same team. We all have the same goals. We should be working together. Kumbaya. It's amazing. So here we go. That was a bit of a long intro, but we finally got here. Here are the 6 things DevOps wants from InfoSec. 6 ways information security can be better to better help DevOps teams be awesome at releasing secure code. Or if you think about it, 6 ways for security to level up its marriage with DevOps. Let's start with thing number 1, empowerment. And yes, I created that little picture there. DevOps teams want to be empowered. And no, I don't mean power as in direct access to the production database server, not that kind of power. I mean DevOps teams want to have the power to be great at security on their own. But wait, you ask, I thought that's security's job. Security has to be great at security. What do you mean that DevOps teams wants to be great at security on their own? Don't they still need us? Well, yes, security is important. Security still needs to be great at security, but developers want the ability to be great at security without the hand-holding and the nagging and everything else from the security team. Developers want to be empowered. So what are some specific things that security can do in order to empower their DevOps teams? Well, you can do one thing, provide security training for your development teams. It's always the first thing that I like to come in with. Get people smart on security. Any developer, and I promise you this, but any developer worth his or her salt will want to write secure code and have secure infrastructure. That's not even a question. There's no developer that I know that purposely writes insecure code, unless we're talking about solar wind backdoors. Do you know of any developers who actually do this? But the issue is that maybe the developer doesn't know what they don't know, right? They don't know that their code is insecure or their infrastructure. They don't know that it's insecure. And that's where the security team has to come in. Well, you need to recommend helpful courses or content that would help your developers learn about security. And don't just send them links to like a SANS course or a Cyber course. You want to really get down with them. Hold lunch and learns with your teams. You do the teaching, security professional. You are actually up front of the room doing the teaching or on the Zoom. Work with them, of course, to build in time for training. You don't want to just drop an hour-long training session in front of them. Like, put a story or 2 in there during their sprint to like carve out time so that they can take your training. So it's just part of their sprint. Give them opportunities to learn. Just find fun ways for them to learn security. There's plenty of options out there. Number 2, you want to build great security culture within your company and your DevOps teams in particular. You want to create a welcoming, security-minded community in which developers can feel safe to ask security questions. You don't want to do this thing where you're like blaming and shaming, right? You want your developers to be okay and comfortable talking to you. You have to be a people person. You have to be nice, and don't make them run away from you and crying. Like, that's not a good way of building relationships. You want to actually end up trying to build something what I call security champions and security advocates, and they're embedded now within the DevOps teams. So they speak for security when you aren't in the room. So you always have a security presence, even though security might be completely doing something else in a different domain. And that's awesome, right? That's like scalable security. You can just have this army of security advocates sprinkled throughout the organization, just like it's like singing the praises of security. And then that's really the best way of doing this. And it definitely helps with the burnout, folks, I'm telling you. You want to make security fun. Use positive metrics instead of negative metrics to track application security. Like, don't be like, oh, we have 50 security vulnerabilities that we haven't closed yet, and here's how old they are and everything else. That's a negative one. Like, you want to do a positive one where you're like, hey, we stopped all these attacks, and we stopped, we didn't put in these, or we caught these security vulnerabilities before they got into production. Like, those kind of metrics, you want to have those really positive ones. Because a lot of people work better with positive carrots than like the negative sticks, and don't do that thing where security folks do and be like super snobby about security stuff. Developers hate super snobby security people. Try to say that 5 times fast, but you know what I mean. Like, do not be one of those uppity ups and you walk into the room, you're like, I obviously know everything about security. Like, first of all, you don't. Like, everyone Googles. So please don't be one of those snobby security people. Developers hate that. And moving on to number 3, let DevOps own security. This one is huge for me because, well, first of all, it means you kind of have to hand over some of the power and control that you're used to having. But let's think about what giving up this power actually means. First, it gives DevOps ownership of application security, infrastructure security, and it automatically creates an atmosphere in which DevOps now both want to reduce the number of security vulnerabilities and they support whatever remediations or mitigation strategies that these vulnerabilities need in order to fix them, right? There is automatic buy-in to the solutions. You don't have to like force down a solution on them because they're the ones offering up the solution to themselves. And secondly, you're going to have more free time to work on other security domains. Application security is your favorite one, just like everyone else's. But you can spend time where there's 8 domains. You want to find time to do all of the other 7. There's so much to do. So application security, as you know, is probably best left to the developers anyway, because they know more about their code and their infrastructure than you ever will as a security person. It's just hands down. They're in the weeds every single day. So let them shift that stuff left, shift those security activities left, let them own security. For me, that just means more of that empowerment. And finally, and probably most importantly, get out of their way. Don't slow them down. Give them the tools that they need in order to be successful. More of that in a minute, but let them own the problem, then take a step back and just get out of the way. You want to do that thing where you're like, I trust you guys because you guys are awesome rock star developers. You're going to do the right thing. I know you care about security. Boom. They're going to go in and they're going to rock it for you, security person. You're just going to sit back and basically be like, oh, my little Padawans, that was great. That's the kind of thing you want. You just don't want to be in there micromanaging and being like that mother-in-law that's super naggy, right? You do not want to do that, or father-in-law, whatever. Although my father-in-law is pretty great. Anyway, speaking of tools, that brings us to the second thing that DevOps wants from InfoSec. Developers want tools and integrations. Developers love tools and integrations. I don't know many developers who would want to create something from scratch if it already exists somewhere, right? Particularly if it's open source free on GitHub, or it comes native with whatever service you might already be subscribing to. They just want to find something that works with and put it in, and it works with as little hassle as possible. It won't break. Everything works perfectly. They love that stuff. And also, hopefully they put that stuff in and it doesn't add any additional risk to the organization, but that's perfect stuff, So it's the same for security tools and security integrations. As you know, there are tons of great security tools and features out there. Some are free, some are not. Most of them are not. But here's where security teams can help their DevOps teams really take their relationship to the next level when DevOps teams needs a new security tool or integration. Okay, so the first thing you could do is you could research for them. You can research the security tools and integrations for them. Here's a personal example of one that I did not too long ago with my awesome developers here at Energage while we were looking for an authentication service. provider. And I was like, well, I can take a look at that for you guys and I can recommend some. So I literally just went through, created a spreadsheet, and each column had I think I had 4 or 5 different authentication service providers. And I was like, well, here's one. And I just did a bunch of comparisons, depending on what kind of functionality that they had and how that lined up with the requirements that we had and stuff like that. And it basically just checks how much it costs, if there was any training involved, how long it would take, all that stuff. And I just helped them out. And I built them a clear option, like a roadmap for them to choose. They're like, ooh, look at this candy in a candy shop, right? And be like, oh, this one looks really good. I won't tell you which one we ended up with, but it was just really clear where you can say, this is the perfect one for us. This is the one we choose. So I help them say, this is the authentication service provider that we want. It's got a super great API. Check this out, guys. I gave them all this amazing stuff about that service provider, and they chose it. They were like, oh, thanks. So helping them choose that provider really saved them a lot of time, because now they can just focus on integrating it and putting it in and doing other things other than the research and all that stuff, blah, blah, blah. So I helped them out there, probably saved them a few weeks, right? So that's the kind of stuff that you're trying to look for. Do the research for them. It really helps. And here's a big one. Make sure these tools and integrations are easy to use, because if it's easy to use, they will use it. But say if a tool adds a minute to their build time when a normal build would only take 5 seconds, they're not going to use this tool, right? Because, all of a sudden they're just sitting there every single time something compiles. You're like, oh, it's going to take, another 2 minutes. And, and if they're doing that multiple times a day, that's just going to get people very angry. So you do not want to be messing around with their build time, essentially. But things like usability, if it's frustrating to use, they're not going to use it. If it's broken, they're not going to use it. Make sure you're getting a tool that really essentially is just a really good tool that you would use if you were a developer. That golden rule thing really works. All right. And that brings us to the third thing that DevOps wants from InfoSec. Developers want examples, lots and lots of examples. I want you to show them what good code looks like. And what does that mean? Here's some examples of some examples, because this goes beyond mere code snippets. You want to think about security unit tests and libraries, wrapper classes, filters, and my favorite, regex for allowed characters for different types of input fields. Yes, everyone loves regex. So you can just be here's a set of regex for you. And people are like, oh, thank you. They're so excited for that stuff. You can nerd out with them. And of course, the more extensible your code, the better. So let them build on top of what you've given them. You can just be oh, here is a base library that you can use to build your things. It's going to be amazing. And here's something that you want, if you want to put a super boost on this relationship builder thing. You want to give developers a place where they can share all this code and the libraries and their YAML files. Put it on corporate intranet if that's still a thing. Make sure that information is indexed so that developers from other parts of the organization can find it. Let them share amongst each other what they've discovered works best in their frameworks and environments. It's pretty amazing. And as an FYI, we do use this here at Energage, but Stack Overflow now has a Teams function that is essentially a private instance of Stack Overflow. So my team at Energage uses it here. We constantly have security questions asked on there. And it's more than just me answering them, which is kind of nice, because then I know that, if I get hit by a bus or I win the lottery or something, somebody's going to be able to answer security questions on our team Stack Overflow. And it also proves to me that, I'm building a great security culture within the DevOps teams. And it makes me feel really proud. So it's just one of those things, makes me happy. Number 4. I want to say the specificity. I wish I had used an easier word. Specificity. Okay, the fourth thing here, DevOps wants from InfoSec. Developers want specificity. Be specific when giving a security requirement or writing a security bug or vulnerability. Don't just say meaningless words and phrases like encode, validate input. People really need more specific things. You don't want to just be here's a word, go ahead and you're on your own. Figure that out. Point out the package, the class, the method, the line of code, and the vulnerability. Tell them specifically what the risk is if the vulnerability remains unpatched. You want to just be super, super down in the details. Be this is exactly what that means. And if you are a great teacher and you can explain through stories, that is the best way of actually learning about vulnerabilities. I feel like I've gotten better over the years explaining to different developers what vulnerabilities are and how they can affect the organization, just by being there to be like, and here's what happens when you don't. I'll tell them a story of that happening, and it's super interesting when the light bulb goes off in their eyes and they're like, oh, I get it now. It's really, really cool. So be a great teacher of this stuff, tell really great stories. People really, really remember that stuff. So and just to wrap this up, you want to read SDKs, you want to read the FN manual there. You want to help them, the developers, give them 1 or 2 options on writing the code more securely, like rewriting it, evaluate and propose other solutions that address the problem, such as using open source libraries, vendor tools, because these developers are really cranking out the code. Like, do the research for them, help them out. All right, number 5, developers want to be able to perform their own security assessments. Now, I know this sounds counterintuitive and a possible conflict of interest, but hear me out. Developers want security to be seamless with whatever they're doing, right? That means security needs to be built in to their development lifecycle. Of course, the earlier the security activities are happening, like security architecture reviews or secure code requirements, the better. That's the whole shift left mentality that we talk about all the time as security practitioners, right? But how can this be done? Well, there are a couple of ideas. You might want to give DevOps teams security cheat sheets and checklists to help uncover possible security vulnerabilities as early as possible in the SDLC. I have certainly done this in the past, where I literally will just have a spreadsheet of things like, have you checked for this? Have you checked for this? All throughout the application stack. There could be like infrastructure things, like what level of encryption are you using on the database? Like all these different things that they be able to use. Just be like, oh yeah, we do this, or oh no, we haven't thought of that yet. Like they actually go through the list, and it's kind of like a security questionnaire that you use internally for your developers, and they really like that stuff. Give them really specific requirements. They love specific requirements. It really helps. And number 2, think about auto adding security tasks to technical stories. We use Azure DevOps here. We don't use anything fancy like a Jira, but DevOps actually has this function where it auto adds tasks and things to specific types of stories. So, and the task can just be pre-filled. So some of the tasks are security tasks where you're like, have you done your security coding check? Like things like that. So maybe, and you can always take them out if they're not relevant, but just having those auto added to the stories really helps the developers, because it reinforces. I'm looking at the code. Okay, be specific. Be Pacific. So help the teams out. Because you're living in their environment. Like if you're in their world with them, and you're in the same tools that they're using, and you're speaking their same language, and you understand their cadence, and like they're all their like agile things that they do, like that really helps. Because now you're not just like floating above them, just like dropping stuff like a seagull and flying away, be like, here's some things that like, you don't want to do that. You want to be like, in with them and like go with the vibe, understand where they're working in, and try to help them out there. Like you are a service for the DevOps teams. You're not trying to give them more heartache and headache and stomach aches. Like you want to help them out. Like, and remember, they actually want to write secure code. So everyone is on the same team. All right. So what does this all add up to? You're essentially breaking down a large security assessment, which would normally happen at the end of a project before a release, into, now we're calling them mini security assessments. And each one of these are now like sprinkled throughout the development lifecycle, and they all have like their own little scopes, so like in the beginning of the project, you're doing requirements and stuff like that, where you're like, all right, or in the beginning of a sprint, you're like, all right, so we're going to do this. Okay, now let's talk about what that means from a security perspective. Are we missing this and this and this? And when we talk about architecture, if we're setting up a new machine or appliance or a new tier or something for databases, like you want to talk about all that with them, and they give them the requirements, be like, have you thought about these specific things for security? And so once they start getting to the habit of talking about security earlier in the development lifecycle, the easier it's going to be at the end, when now all you have to do is literally audit the fact that they've done these things. So you're not like performing a full-on security assessment. You're just coming in at the end and be like, oh yeah, you did that? Okay, great, you did that, awesome. You just keep going down the checklist, and then you're looking at the outputs of that too. Like, for example, if they're running security unit tests, all you have to do is verify that the unit tests have run and they all pass, and any outputs from that, and you can actually see and be like, oh, that looks good, you guys ran unit tests for cross-site scripting, oh awesome, like all that kind of stuff. It really helps, especially you as a security person. Now all you have to do is come in at the end and just be like, yeah, you're done, instead of like panicking and then trying to do this full-on pen test, which you're not going to cover everything anyway, because it's you only got like 4 days to do it, and then you're supposed to crank out a report and turn it around. Like, that doesn't even work. That might have worked years ago, but that does not work for Agile. It does not work for these teams on 2-week sprints. Like, does not work. So be fast with them, go in their environment, like go in their tools, speak their language, because at the end of the day, it's the last thing here. Developers want to be trusted, because we're all professionals. We all know how to do our jobs. No one wants a big brother looking over our shoulders or holding their hand when it comes to security. You want to trust your developers to build security into their applications, give them the space that they need in order to do this. You want to be a service. Again, security is a service for the business. You are not a nagging in-law. You want to trust them to be great at security. Because yes, trust is built over time. You don't want to just walk in and hand over some tools, code examples, and do a couple of lunch and learns and like call it a day. Like, that's not what you're trying to do. You need to be asking the right questions with the developers. Ask them why things are built this way. Ask them what circumstances brought them to choose a particular architecture or coding pattern or whatnot. The fact that you're taking the time to understand their code base and their architecture will go a huge and very long way in establishing that trust and communication between DevOps and security. And that's really what I'm trying to say here, guys. It's like, if you have that relationship with the teams and they trust you because now you're on the same team, you're not like a versus kind of thing. You're not a competitor, but you are helping them release their code faster, with more security in mind. Like, they will love you. They will say, yes, come, like, we accept you, security person. Like, they will bring you into conversations. They will include you in your Slack channels. Like, that is amazing. You want that. You want to build that trust. All right. And remember, above all, developers want to be secure. They want to write secure code. Developers take pride in their craft. They want to release the best code possible on budget, on time, within scope. As information security professionals, we can help them accomplish this if we get down in the trenches with them, providing assistance in every way possible, empowering them to fight our security battles together, because we all win when we win hearts and minds for security. And I will leave it at that. That is the end of my talk. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you were able to take something away from it. I know I probably left some time on the clock there, but happy to answer any questions if there are any in the chat. Again, my name is Naomi Buckwalter, and you can find me on Twitter and LinkedIn. My Twitter is a hot mess, so you go ahead and ignore that. But if you're on my LinkedIn, I'm like actually more serious. So go ahead, find me, and happy to answer questions in the chat now if there are any. Seth.
Yes, there was one from Dave Lintner. I'm not sure if you can see it on the screen. He's always got questions.
I know Dave from back in the day, Dave.
Yeah.
Like how Dave asked a question and then noped out of the stream right there.
There he is, yeah.
His device keeps disconnecting, and I'm not sure why.
StreamYard doesn't like it when you're transitioning. It's just weird. Anyway.
So your question, you want to re-ask that?
Yeah. So Naomi, thank you, by the way, for that awesome talk. Who are the stakeholders in an organization that are really important in making sure that an approach like this will work? And second to that, how do you get buy-in from e-staff? Because this is a big culture change in a lot of organizations. And we're seeing it transform, but what have you seen and what approaches have worked?
Yeah, so when I say about building trust, that really starts at the highest levels. So my first job is to win over the hearts and minds in the entire organization for security. And that starts at the top. So I have a steering committee, a security steering committee, where we meet every month, once a month, and we talk about these kind of things. Like we talk about things that are going on the dev teams and what's going, like what kind of security activities are happening throughout the organization. And once I have the buy-in of the executive teams, it's much, much easier to affect culture change from a security perspective down throughout the other teams. And I almost never have any problems asking for assistance. And again, helping, it really helps that I have security advocates like tech leads and things that really are bought into security. And they will always, always represent security for me. And I trust them to do that. It's wonderful.
No, that's great. I mean, you know, for me, what we're seeing and kind of goes along with what you're talking about is, you know, engineers are really, really intelligent, and you give them a problem and they're going to solve it. And the problem here is security, and we need their help to solve it. Right?
Yeah. Yeah, and they love coming up with their own solutions. Like, and already that buy-in is such a huge thing because you don't have to convince anyone it's the right way to do it. They're the ones who came up with the solution in the first place. You're like, great, yeah,
right.
That works. And they're going to know better than you anyway because they're in the code every day and they're in the infrastructure every day. Like you would just be like a nagging fly. Like, you don't know what you're talking about. Go away.
Yeah, they're tired of us telling them that their baby's ugly. I mean,
yeah,
that's
that's
real.
exactly the phrase. I think I took that from my Vanguard days, actually, the whole baby analogy.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
The thing I really liked too was how much, and obviously you mentioned Vanguard days, so you've probably seen these sorts of things, but how much like positive things you want security to bring to the table, unit tests and blessed frameworks and those sorts of things.
Yeah, no, it's so true.
That was really great. It was an amazing talk, and also be specific. So
be specific, yeah. That's why I laughed in the middle. Sorry, there. I was like, squirrel. Yeah, I mean, I was a developer back in the day, and I remember interacting with security, and I always had this weird taste where they thought they were just better than me, and be like, "Excuse you, like, do you even know what you're talking about?" So I was like embarrassed for them a little bit. You know?
Dave and I.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I have so many feelings about this. Like, I think security could be done so much better. We have such a human side of it that we're lacking that just is hurting us. So if we reached out, built relationships and trust, I know it sounds corny and not cool, but like we can't always be black boxes. We can't just take an input and be like, here's a report, you know, like that's, like you're just going to be ignored. Yeah.
No, it's great. It's not corny at all. It's
thanks.
What we need to be doing is more human side of
the human side. Yeah, I know. I'm okay to be corny. I can tell dad jokes all day.
Yeah, I think the key is it's okay to be a solutions oriented security team.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And if we had great KPIs for that, like I wish there would be some great things that we could measure this, but I have yet to find a good one. If you guys have great ideas on measuring positive security interactions like that, let me know. Sometimes I like to see like how many meetings have I been invited to? Like I'll go back and be like, I was invited to 0. That's not good.
Yeah, you know that's probably a talk in and of itself. Like, what are great security KPIs? Because I haven't seen any yet.
They're just negative. They're really negative ones, you know, like, and it depends on the maturity of the organization. Like, obviously, if you don't have anything other than vulnerabilities, you're going to want to at least track them. But yeah, once you have a good security mindset within the development teams, like they're gonna know when they're like, oh, we stopped a security vulnerability, a possible like injection, or something, but like, and we stopped it before or whatever. But like that kind of stuff gets me all happy. I love that. The warm and fuzzies.
Yeah.
Yeah, we really don't have enough of those, right? That's always the issue.
Yeah, it leads to the burnout. Like we need to celebrate more for sure. If we just security for sure, like you just go and be like, hey, I appreciate you. Make security fun. just take advantage of like different personalities on your team that, you know, like, I don't know, just do things like make fun of yourself. That's like the one thing that I love doing is be like, oh, security, we're terrible, you know. Yeah. But like the developers appreciate that. Like they understand that you're not taking yourself that seriously. It is a serious matter, but you're not going to just be like, I'm the most important thing in the world, right? Like, you know what I'm getting at? So
the holier than thou attitude.
That's it. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. The elitism.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I always go back to you know, as being as a developer, right? And Naomi, you're coming from the same background as you always viewed security as kind of this, like the whole agent of no, right? Like they're the ones that stop us from actually accomplishing what we need to accomplish. And your whole talk's, you know, based around what does, you know, DevOps or what do they want from security? But that's, I don't know, like I've seen organizations turn around, but I still see the majority of them that I run into where that's the feeling, right? Wow. Oh crap, we got to get security involved. It means more work. It means more.
Yeah, I've been there. And I think the larger organizations, I just have to wake up to it. I'm definitely in the space now where I've hit this thing where I'm like, I like mid-sized businesses. I like small teams because you can affect change so much easier. But yeah, those organizations, hopefully in the near future, we're going to see a change where security it's got a seat at the table. First of all, you know, it's helping executives make right decisions. It's a trusted advisor within the organization. It's seen as an enabler of the business, you know, but it will take time to get there. We need to get away from this mindset of like security always being this scary thing that you don't want to interact with.
Yep. Yeah. Putting a friendly face on it.
Exactly. Smile, guys.
we just need Dave and Stefan on every team. There we go.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
I will say the one thing that I've done, and it's partially to soften up devs, but you touched on a little bit, was to come in with we rather than the security says we should, you know, you should do this, but that's instantly adversarial. But just saying we, as in we're all here now. Some dev teams give me the finger and tell me to go get bent, but there are teams that are much more receptive to the fact that I'm coming in as someone who wants to partner with them rather than coming in, like you mentioned, you know, with like, I know everything, you guys done goof, and I'm gonna fix everything for you. Don't worry, you know?
Yeah, exactly. I like that. I want to steal that. We, not you.
Yeah.
We, the collective. Yeah, I like that.
Well, I just like to say, no, it's really compliance, right? It's their fault. I just push it off. No, I'm just kidding.
Just blame compliance. No, I hate that. I mean, I will pull out the compliance stick if I have to, but I try not to go there. That's my last resort, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's only when you're dealing with a Stefan that you need to pull that out, right?
Dave knows of a time when compliance and audit and risk and InfoSec had to get involved in something that I did. I have a nickname for it. There's a whole thing.
One we will not share with the audience.
No, clearly. That's what makes it even better.
Yeah. Anyhow, well, Naomi, thank you so much. This has been a super informative discussion, and
awesome.
Hopefully we'll get better at it. We'll get it chopped up and or the video and dropped onto YouTube, and we'll tag you when that all goes live.
Cool.
And yeah, but otherwise, I don't think there's any other questions outside of what Dave had for now. We'll let people reach out to you otherwise.
Awesome.
And yeah, appreciate the time.
Guys.
Yeah, it was
great job.
Cool. Yeah. Thank you.